So since the George Floyd murder, there have been a variety of responses to the uprisings, riots, protests, whatever you want to call them, around the country from police departments. They've responded in a variety of ways. And today I just wanted to take a couple of examples and compare and contrast and talk a little bit about how different publics may view these responses and why it's important. So I'm going to hit you with that in a second, but before I do, I just want to remind everyone I'm a former police officer. Now I study policing as a PhD student. This isn't designed to be critical of police or critical of citizens, just to create a conversation and help us start to think about these ideas so that we can move forward and design a policing institution that's acceptable to everyone in our society, or the vast majority of people in our society at least. If you want to support this, please hit subscribe. It ensures that more people see this by sort of tricking that Google algorithm into putting this on people's pages. So let's flip on over and go ahead and start watching some video and breaking it down. The first one's going to be from New York. It's going to be a union leader addressing officers and addressing the public. And I just want you to pay close attention to the body language of the people in the audience, of the speaker, of what they're wearing, and the words that they're saying.
In the black community, mothers are worried about their children getting home from school without being killed by a cop. What world are we living in? That doesn't happen. It does not happen.
So, as a police officer, former police officer, someone who has a lot of friends who are police officers, I don't think any of them are going out looking to kill kids on the way home from school. At the same time, if we look at American history, we look at even recent history, and we look at the lived experiences of certain populations like black folks in this country. If you're a mother of a black child, I can see it being a very reasonable fear that your kid could be killed by the police on the way home from school. I can understand why that fear exists, and I think it's important that we recognize that fear and acknowledge that that's unacceptable. We don't want parts of our population to feel that way. I just had a friend whose son was pulled over and had a terrible experience where the officer touched his gun, and the kid didn't want to drive anymore. It's awful. People shouldn't have to deal with that. So rather than saying, that's not true, even if you don't believe it's true, I think it's important to just take a step back and say, I don't think that's true, but that's the way my fellow citizen feels. That's the way the person that I'm sworn to protect and serve feels about me. I need to look inside my organization and make some changes so that they no longer view me that way. Because responding, saying, well, no, that's not true, it's not really productive when you've had a breach of trust between two groups, so the citizens and the police. And it was the powerful, I just talked with Joe Ham from Michigan State about trust, and he talks about how that when there's a power discrepancy, there's a vulnerability for the people who don't have the power, and before they can trust you after something like this happens, there needs to be change. So just responding by saying this isn't true, I don't think it's helpful. And in the minds of a large number of people, it may be true that this is that the police are not doing that. But for other people, a non-insignificant portion of the population, there's a very real fear, and that's important.
I am not Derek Chauvin. They are not him. He killed someone. We didn't. We are restrained. And you know what? I'm saying this to all the cops here.
And just take a look at what the body language is. Everyone's got their sort of arms closed, and COVID's out there. We've got the masks on. Some big. You look at the crowd. To be fair, earlier scenes did show a little bit more diversity, and there were some diverse speakers at this event. But this is the image that was blasted out over Twitter, blasted out over Facebook, all over the internet. And just look at the demographics. It looks to me like almost all white guys of a certain age, khakis and polos, short haircuts, muscles, a very particular segment of the American population standing together in a very sort of with aggressive tones and sort of angry response. And to police officers, when you hear this, and what you're going to hear in a second, I would feel a sense of solidarity. Yes, someone's standing up for me, and my life matters too. But again, we need to think how other people may view this, and in this particular time in history, how the person who feels othered, it's very important that we pay attention to how they feel and take that into account in the way that we present our propaganda, because this is what this is. This is messaging that these unions and departments are putting out, and it does have an impact. And I think this is counterproductive.
Because you know what? Everybody's trying to shame us. The legislators.
If you're just trying to make cops happy in a small, and the more people on the right, this is probably good.
About our profession. But you know what? This isn't stained by someone in Minneapolis. It's still got a shine on it. And so do theirs.
And it is stained.
So
When this happens, it stains everyone's badge,
Stop
unfortunately.
treating us like animals,
but that's
and
true.
bugs, and start treating us with some respect.
So just imagine if we were to boil this down. There's been this breach of trust, and now there's this moment where we need some type of reconciliation. Imagine if this were an interpersonal relationship. Say it was a romantic relationship, and one side had assaulted the other side, hurt the other side very badly, and there was this anger by the victim and just righteous anger, and the person who had the person, it's not the same person, but it is the same sort of it's the same social control organization. If that person were seen to be saying these types of things, like treat me like a human being, show me some respect, don't treat me like an animal, when they're the ones who the original incident was started by, if that makes sense. Is that a good way? If this was your personal relationship and you hurt your loved one, would being defensive? I can understand being defensive. I'm often defensive, but at a rational level, would being this defensive be productive? Would it help with reconciliation? I tend to think not. So I just wanted to talk about what they're wearing, the khakis and the polos. For me, this is just something that I have in my closet. It's something I've worn my whole adult life. It's something you throw on when you got to go to something sort of semi-formal, but not like necessarily like a suit, but it's like an office sort of attire. You can get by. It's comfortable. It looks fine. But not everyone views it that way. So the people who are wearing this, I'm sure that's the way they view it. It's the way I've always viewed it. But there are other people who think of this as holding certain meaning. There has been, and over the course of time in the United States, by white nationalist movements, a concerted effort to shape the dress of people who show up at protests, to be more to dress to present themselves better, to not look like poor people, to look like middle class white Americans who want their country back. And the uniform over the years, it's not an official uniform, but a common thing that these people will wear when they show up to these rallies is the khakis and the polos. While these officers, I have no doubt they had no intention of wearing this, there's a non-insignificant portion of the population who do make an association between the khakis and the polos and the white guy with this white nationalist movement. So again, it's just a matter of thinking. It doesn't matter it doesn't really matter how I view this in this particular situation. It's how the population that we're having a difficult time reconciling with, that we need to think about and put ourselves in their shoes. How might they view this?
And so do theirs. So do theirs. Stop treating us like animals and thugs, and start treating us with some respect.
As we see here, this is Richard Spencer, who's a leader in the white nationalist movement, with the his little minions with their uniforms on, the khakis and the polos. And again, these guys are intentionally wearing this for a specific reason. The guys, the officers, they didn't. I'm sure they didn't have that intention, but nonetheless, the association is real for many people. Here's Charlottesville. We see the same sort of attire. Again, I believe this is Charlottesville. The khakis, this is sort of the uniform for white nationalists at these events. Like it or not, I don't like it because I don't want to go out and I don't want to have to give up my khakis and my polo. But maybe I just need to think, where am I going today? Is khakis and a polo sending a message? If I go to the store, probably not. But if I go to a press conference with 30 cops and we're all a lot of us are wearing the same thing, maybe it will. So it's something to consider. And here's a little clip of Charlottesville again, being chased by protesters.
What's up?
can't just take your costume off. What the fuck?
So this kid, the white nationalist kid here, he knows what that khakis and the polo means. He wore it with an intent to the people chasing him. He took it off. He thinks that those other people associate it with a white nationalist movement. So there are people who believe this, and it's something to consider. You know, all of these little messages that are sent during an event like this, they matter, and they need to be considered, and it needs to be considered from the perspective of the people that you're targeting. So now I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to show a different response, something sort of on the other end, and this is going to be Phoenix, the chief of police. So this is not the union leadership, which seem to be addressing more of the officers. This is a chief who's trying to reach out to the community. And the first thing I noticed about this was her shirt with this logo. I looked it up, and it's DRAG. It's a community policing initiative. So it's an organization who tries to create a positive non-enforcement environment for kids who are interested in maybe drag racing and who the city wants to keep from doing graffiti. It's sort of like a community policing initiative. She wore that. She didn't go out in uniform to do this. She didn't wear khakis and a polo shirt to do this. She wore something that sent a very particular signal to the people around her.
Things will change. Feels like I'm out here with the people I'm supposed to be out here with. We hear you.
The woman who may hold the key to change in the city of Phoenix joining the cause.
We can't do this alone. We got to do this together. And if walking out in 106 degrees with y'all means that we're going to work together.
So there's two completely different responses. With Chief Williams there, the last one, I think that conservatives would look at that, and a lot of officers would look at that and say, well, she's not siding with our officers. She's siding with the bad guys in this particular case, or she's not acting out of solidarity with us. And then liberals may look at this and say, well, that's COPAGANDA. She's, you know, or activists may say this isn't real. This is just them trying to take the steam out of the movement. This isn't legitimate. The first guys, you know, the conservative side, the cops may look at it and say, wow, this is great. This is really pro-police. This is an act of solidarity for us. And liberals and activists would look at it and say, look, oh, they're white nationalists, you know, they're horrible. These are all different conceptions of the same realities depending on your political and ideological perspective and your lived experience. What I'm trying to, the overall arching message of this is that we need to decide who really matters. Who are we messaging right now? Who are we trying to convince of something? And again, as the people in the position of power who have breached the relationship, it's important, I think, that we take into consideration the people in the street. What are they seeing? What are they thinking? How are they viewing things? And then craft the least damaging message that we can. And I would argue, and I think there's a strong argument to be made, that the efforts made by Chief Williams to get out there and march, though they may be viewed as propaganda by some or not viewed as genuine by some, for a lot of people, that's an important first step. So I just wanted to commend her and to urge all of my police officer friends, my conservative friends, to just say to yourself, what is the most effective method for achieving peace? It may not be the thing that makes you happiest. It may not provide you the opportunity to be critical of things that you find problems with, but I do believe it is the most productive way to move forward. And I just want to thank everyone for checking out this video. Please hit subscribe. It really is important. It does help push these videos out. Comment, ask questions, and I really appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing you again. Have a good one.